Okay, and now we will start. We will start. That was all of that was the welcome. We will start now, and for the first speak, we will like to invite Roland. Where is? It's our CTO, the CTO for Gaia-X ASBA. No, it's Roland. No, can you give me the paper?
It's Christoph.
It's Christoph. Sorry. Wait a second. Is so for the first opening, we have why we need Gaia-X, because the whole time we try to explain why we need a trust framework, and now Christoph will be the person who explains you. He's the CTO of Gaia-X ASBL. Thank you very much, Christoph.
Thank you very much for listening to it. I didn't expect applause already, and. Of course, the topic trust, I don't have to explain that. But let me allow one remark. Why the hell do we have the CTO and not the COO or someone else or an external TEDx speaker doing an inspirational speak about trust? And the reason has fundamentally to do what Gaia-X is all about. Of course, we start with compliance document regulations, but eventually those committees, they produce rules embodied in a PDF document. So these are rules, and we do not, as Gaia-X and the community, we do not stop there. We also provide, of course, the specifications, how to implement that, and that's the proof of the pudding actually, how to implement the rules of the PRC in software. So if you want the proof of the PRC, the proof of Gaia-X is in its software. And one key element, I would say, being a little bit proud of the team, one key element here is, of course, the CTO team, which kind of, and this explains my role, which kind of explains this is the PRC wanting to do something very weird or very wild or very innovative, and this is reality where the OSS community says, hey, Christoph, you can't do that, we need something else completely. So this kind of transformation balancing is part of my daily job. Now, coming back to the fundamental question of why the trust framework. Trust, of course, is a very broad domain. I have prepared 3 questions how I would like to address that. And the first question probably is the most fundamental of all, almost philosophical. And I trust you that you have all read the framework documents of Gaia-X. Please reflect what's the definition of trust in the Gaia-X official documents. Where would you look? What's the definition of trust? Trust framework. Exactly. We don't have one. There is a small paper issued, but we don't have an official definition. Because with us, with people, we can talk about trust without having a clear understanding or a clear definition, a philosophical definition. But that is insufficient, unfortunately, a little bit for the CTO team situation. So I have provided a definition of trust for you. And this is not done by ChatGPT. This is done by condensing 38 studies on what is the best, actually, a universal almost definition of trust. And we will have to read it because it exhibits one key element of trust and also of the trust framework. Trust is the willingness of someone, which we normally call truster, to engage, remember that's the crucial part, to engage in a risky behavior, so it can fail, that stems from their vulnerability, so the vulnerability of the person, of the truster who trusts someone else, to the behavior of the other party. So it's a two-person relationship, and you don't have trust. You have to behave in a trusted way. You have to show trust. You have to engage in a risky behavior. So if I say, I can't just say, I trust that podium, I would have to jump, and that's the trust. The characteristic, the property that you trust something, the characteristic that you trust Gaia-X, for instance, is that you spend the money and that you find us trustworthy, but trust in itself shows that you really spend the money and come here. Now that we have solved the fundamental question of what is trust, question number 2, how would we establish trust? We have actually, for time reasons, I'm skipping that, we have actually an academic definition of the trust framework. It's in the annex of the architecture document with the trust indices, not really that one. But key point here is IT coders like to have precise definitions. So that's the key takeaway. Having solved trust, how do we establish trust? And there are 2 points I want to make. First, in old ecosystems, like 2,500 years ago in a Greek marketplace, in face-to-face interactions, we have developed those skills. Actually, we have developed those skills since 65 million as the mammal species when we took over the world. And I have actually a little exercise for you. I will present you 3 pictures of faces, and you have to sort those faces. Please put me mentally, of course, put the least trustworthy picture, the least trustworthy face on that side. There is kind of a middle one. Please put that in the middle. And there is the most trustful person, most trustful face. Please do that. And because this is a very, very old program, trust yourself, trust your genes, I give you 15 seconds to do that. Starting when the last picture showed, 15 seconds. Please rank them in order of increasing trustworthiness. 10, 5, done. I won't challenge you, but this is the exercise which we did, or not we, but which research projects did. And if you look at the differences, if you look at the difference in trustworthiness, they are minuscule. But there are some features in those faces, like the eyebrows, like the lips, like the chin, where that level of trustworthiness is 3 standard deviations better than the middle one. And look at the minor deviations. So that's fascinating what we can do in 15 seconds. Now we had 65 million years of time to learn that. How would we do that in global supply chains? And I don't know what happened to me, but I choose an exogenous supply chain shock in the US. I don't remember, it must be subconscious why I chose the US. If something disruptive happens in the US, what negative, or where do you feel negative consequences in that case, it's the space, it's the airline economy. You can do that. The Complexity Science Hub in Vienna has that publicly available. So how would you establish in such an environment trust between companies, where we are talking about like 10,000 companies for a single airline provider, or even in the mundane construction sector, we have 100 professionals at smaller sites. And if you go and build a nuclear power plant, you have 2,500 companies with all their employees. Evidently, we cannot do the exercise face-to-face of the past. But what's the answer? How can we establish trust in these ecosystems? And you should have the answer, obviously, because it's our trust framework. That's exactly why we have building that. And you know the 2 elements of that. We have the rules on the top, and we have the facial figures, the common elements of trust at the Gaia-X technical compatibility level. Of course, you know that the rules, in principle, you can implement the rules in whatever trust compatibility layer you have, but it pays off. Think of the faces. It pays off that we have eyebrows, that we have lips. Otherwise, identifying trustworthiness would be very, very hard, especially now that we are extending our compliance document to allow extensions, still having a little bit of Gaia-X or more or less Gaia-X inside, but we would also allow completely different embodiments. And trustworthiness determination is only happening in an economic way, like quick, if we have a common technical compatibility layer. It's very hard for us humans to estimate the trustworthiness of a bridge, because we have never been trained to do that. Or a tree. If you are a squirrel, you can do that because you have 10 million years time of evolutionary history of your phylogenetic past to do that. We don't. We don't have the time, I also think, to wait 10 million years to identify trustworthiness, incorporate 10,000 airspace elements. Because I'm concerned with implementation, I also can provide the technical underpinnings of all that. So if you want to have a one-page summary of all of what Gaia-X is eventually about, that's the slide. We will share the slide, so you don't have to take a picture. I'm not going into that. Of course, it should be in an infographic, but everything which I tell you is grounded in something tangible. I can't live just by philosophizing. Now, what is the most important final third question? Of course, why are we doing it at all? And actually, I'm not going to answer that personally. I will go back 50 years, where Kenneth Arrow, a Nobel laureate in economics, and please bear with me, we are going through that because it has 3 or 4 mentions of why trust is so important in economy. Trust is an important lubricant, like oil, like grease, of any social system. It's extremely efficient. I mean, that's already part of why. It saves a lot of trouble. Again, why do we need a trust framework? To have a fair degree of reliance on other people's word. That's nice. Trust and similar value are goods. So we can embody them in software. So that's really a key point. They are commodities. They have real practical economic value. I have an example how much it costs not to be trusty. They increase, again, in the same paragraph, the efficiency of the system, enable you to produce more goods, which is another form of saying you're more productive, but they are not commodities for which you can trade on the open market. This is not possible, and it may not be even meaningful. And actually, this last sentence is the reason it's our Gaia-X ecosystem raison d'etre. It's the reason why we need us, you, the Gaia-X ASBL, the whole ecosystem, because you cannot buy that on the market. The efficiency, I was hinting at the cost level of how much you can save by being trustworthy. If you translate that, and I'm a hobby economist, I've published a theoretical paper, it goes into transaction cost theory. You can calculate how much the Gaia-X trust framework saves you cost, and it also increases the network effects, which is completely different. And the reason is, if I trust Paki and Paki trusts Daniel, then I would also be able, because it's a transitive relation, to trust Dani. And that's creating a new kind of relationship, and that's cooperation, that's enabling for cooperation, something the platform thinking US businesses do not understand at all. I can put a price tag on what it costs social systems like national economies, what it costs not to be trustworthy. And what is the most litigious nation of the world? What is the nation which likes to go to court immediately? It's the US. And the legal costs in the US take 2% of their whole GDP. So that's a kind of a trust tax, a lack of trust tax in the US. Now, most of us, I think, are Europeans. What's the comparable level? How much of our GDP do we spend in Europe? Because we are not trusting each other sufficiently. How much do you think? Yeah, you don't have to answer that, of course. 2.1 is the US, very bad, of course. No. It's a third. It's a third. So that's the answer. The answer to how much trust saves is not 42, it's more like 60%. That's the answer. But you can even do better. The Netherlands have only 25% of the trust costs of the US. So the answer depends, but it's certainly 60% on average, 75% if you have really a trust framework in place. Of course, we can always do that, or also do that in very detailed manner. I stole that from 2 projects, IECO and Eupro-Gigant, so they forgive me because I was involved as well. We can calculate the percentage for your ecosystem, how much Gaia-X, the Gaia-X trust framework saves you. We can calculate that, actually. And if you want to have that formalized, go to your dearest board of directors member and ask him to prioritize that. We started that 1 year ago, but it was the reprioritized. We can do that. So that's eventually the answer of why would the Gaia-X trust framework matter. 60% reduction in transaction costs, also in ecosystems, of course, not just on the global level. So that answers the 3 questions. I have one meta remark on trust. Probably you have spotted I have used a few AI-generated pictures. If you look very carefully, I have marked them as AI-generated because we want, as Gaia-X, as a person, I want to be trustful and I want to earn your trustfulness. So yes, you should trust us as an ecosystem, but please verify. That's one of the mottos of the OSS community. I don't know, probably Kai brought it up very early. So please don't trust us as a community. Look at the code. If you don't trust your favorite Gaia-X digital clearinghouse, go to another Gaia-X digital clearinghouse or trust service provider. And if you mistrust all of them, take the software and run it for yourself, like in a blockchain. That's the ultimate level of assurance I can give you. With one little adage to that, looking at the 10,000 companies in the ecosystem, we really need to provide an automated solution for today's ecosystems. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you for the trust you have exhibited by spending the money, spending the time. I wish us actually a successful MarketX and TechX here in Valencia. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Christoph. Amazing. This is the best trust presentation I have ever seen. I understand now what is the trust framework. Thank you, Christoph.